Transphobia with Harry Potter. I recommend starting at part 1 if you haven't seen any other parts so far. I'm going to be building on information that I've already established in those previous parts. This video is also going to contain very serious discussions about transphobia and violence. So please, proceed with caution if this is an uncomfortable subject for you. This video is also not how to be a good trans ally. I've already made a video all about that if you want to see that. Instead, this video is about why allies are important. So the story starts off Harry grieving the loss of Cedric Diggory, which, as we discussed in the last one, symbolizes that the world is changing to be a more hateful place. And I think we can all understand where he's coming from. So then Dudley comes by to torment Harry, as he does. Depression allegories come to attack, and Harry ends up fighting off these depression allegories by using the expecto pronoun charm. But he's not allowed to use magic in front of muggles. However, the depression allegory shouldn't have been there in the first place, because there's supposed to be an Azkaban guarding the innocent prisoners. And we could think about it this way, that when Harry uses magic, he's being his more authentic self. Yes, it was for self-defense, but as I've said in previous videos, when you be your authentic self, not only is that good for you, but it's good for those around you. It's not selfish to come out. It's like when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put your air mask on before assisting other people. How can you be good to other people if you're not even good to yourself? And then Mrs. Fig reveals herself. Mrs. Fig babysat Harry when he was younger, and it turns out she's a squib. A squib is a non-magical person born to magical parents. And Dumbledore had asked her to watch over Harry to make sure he was okay, which, how good of a job was she really doing? The Dursleys were not treating him well, and what did she do? She just let it happen. Then when Harry gets back to the Dursley household, there's a letter for him that says he's been expelled from Hogwarts, and that people from the Ministry are coming to destroy his wand since he has broken the law, which is a pretty strict punishment. Then there's a second letter from Arthur Weasley who tells Harry not to give up his wand, as there's going to be a hearing now. This is significant because the Ministry wants Harry to be silent about what happened with Cedric. They don't want the truth to get out. They want him kicked out of Hogwarts and kicked out of magical society by keeping him silent. They want to destroy his wand so they won't have to face the consequences, even though they were the ones who started it. As I talked about in the last video, hate is on the rise, and I think we can talk about another real-world example that has happened since I made that video. Laura Ann Carlton was a business owner in LA and an ally to the LGBTQ+ community, and she put up a rainbow pride flag outside of her business, and she was killed because of that. She wasn't even part of the community. She was an ally, and she was murdered. This is hate. Plain and simple. Genocide is happening. And you might be wondering, well, if there's so much hate out there, not only for the LGBTQ+ community, but for allies as well, why should you even be vocal? Here's why. I want you to think about how much harder it is to be an LGBTQ+ person than it is to be an ally. Think how hard that is. There are struggles for allies. I'm not denying that, as I just pointed out an example. But imagine how much more difficult it is for trans people in particular. We're murdered on a regular basis just for who we are. And there are going to be people who will try to say it's a choice to be trans. It is not a choice. In my case, the choice I made was, do I transition or do I die? Because, well, I was that depressed. And don't give me this option of like, well, you should have tried harder. Do you know how long I've been trying? For years, and nothing worked until I transitioned. Transitioning, I've been the happiest I've ever been in my life. I'm not going back. And I would hate that anyone has to do that when I don't want to. When will the violence stop? Then the Dursleys decided to leave Harry over a lawn competition because, you know, that's just the kind of people they are. And then a group of allies comes to visit Harry. This includes Mad-Eye, Lupin, and Tonks. Tonks can actually change her appearance at will. Yes, she's a gender-fluid icon. And they go to the Order of the Phoenix headquarters. It was a secret society set up during the First Wizarding War to stop Voldemort. Harry gets to see Sirius again, and he hasn't seen him in a while, which is a really nice reunion until you remember, oh yeah, Harry was attacked, and Sirius believes it's the government's fault, which, Sirius, of course it was the And Sirius reveals to Harry that he's related to Bellatrix Lestrange, one of Voldemort's hench people. And symbolically, his picture was burned off the family tree because he did not support Voldemort. There are consequences for allies, but that doesn't mean you should stop being an ally. Because remember, think about what it's like for trans people. Trans people get kicked out of their houses all the time, get beat up, and get killed. A lot of schools are now debating what to do with trans students and whether to force out them to their parents. And you might be able to believe that it's a good idea to get the parents involved in this. But I think it's important to remember what the consequences are. Force outing a child to their parents who may not be supportive can result in problems. The child can be abused and forced to detransition. And you might think that's parents' choice, but remember, allowing a child to transition reduces suicidality dramatically. Socially transitioning is not a permanent decision. Socially transitioning means changing your clothes, going by a different name, and a different set of pronouns. That's what socially transitioning is. So if a kid is transitioning at school but not to their parents, that might mean that when they get to school in the morning, they change their clothes and go about their day. And all the teachers and stuff know about what's going on and are just respectful to them. And then, when it's the end of the day, they change out of their clothes and see their parents again. It's not a permanent decision right there. And when it comes to hormone replacement therapy, that does require parental approval. So no permanent change is being done without parental consent. Not to mention when you call queer people groomers and pedophiles, you are making it harder for people who are being groomed sexually to seek help. You are making it harder for people who are facing abuse from pedophiles to get help. Not to mention it's very dehumanizing language, which makes it easier for you to take away our rights. And this isn't the first time it's happened historically, because unlike you, I've actually studied history. This is not new terminology. This was stuff that was said about gay people, black people, Jewish people. And the idea of Sirius being burned off the family tree is symbolic of that. After all, with the kind of language, why would you support a groomer? That is a problematic language and makes Sirius seem inhuman, when in fact, you're the one who's making up those terms. You were the one lying about reality. Think before you say, because words have power. Not to mention, if you actually look at the numbers, the majority of groomers of children are cis white men. I have a feeling you'd be upset if we start calling cis white men groomers. So it's not really about the children. You just don't like trans people. You only feel comfortable doing this because as a cis person, you are in power. Choose to hurt those who you deem as lesser than. Transphobes make wild assumptions about trans people all the time and use that as a basis for their hate. Like, for example, I'm an online trans person. I get this all the time. People make assumptions about my family all the time. For example, this commenter said, I have no father, and my father doesn't support me. Guess what? My father was one of the initial investors of this YouTube channel. Surprised? My mother has also been incredibly helpful and supportive of me, and she was one of the first people I came out to. So honestly, what's your problem? However, I'm not naive. People are not going to be swayed by facts, because they've already been convinced by falsehoods. Transphobes are also some of the most immoral people on this planet. They will literally mock and celebrate our deaths. And then some of you will just straight up tell me that transphobia is just a difference of opinion. No, it's not. If you think my life is inherently worth less than yours, and my life experiences don't matter as much as yours, that's not a difference of opinion. That's a matter of you're a Why do you get to make assumptions about me and I don't get to make assumptions about you? Why do you get to judge me and I don't get to judge you? How come you mock and celebrate our deaths and we still have to be kind to you? Off. This is why being an ally is important. You are an ally to trans people. You are an ally to us and our lives. You can save lives by being an ally. Being trans is hard, primarily because of transphobes. And if you're a transphobe, don't come in here telling me all about religion, because I've talked on this channel about how I wanted to end my life until I transitioned, and transitioning saved my life. And on those same videos, people tell me I should detransition as God intended. You see the problem there. To you, I'm nothing more than a source of Jesus points. You don't see trans people as human beings, and therefore you don't respect us. And when you say stuff like that, you inherently don't care if someone like me lives or dies. I didn't transition for you. I transitioned for me, and it saved my life. If you think being trans is wrong, Well, you think my existence is wrong. If you're an ally, stand up and do the right thing. Stand up to hate. So let's get back to Harry Potter. I know that was a bit of a detour, but let's get back. Harry's on trial. Miss Fig defends him, but it doesn't quite work out, and it doesn't help until Dumbledore gets there to help Harry. We're introduced to Dolores Umbridge, a perfectly pleasant human being who works for the Ministry for Magic. And what this trial shows is that evidence really doesn't matter to bigots. Our fates, in their minds, have already been decided. And Dumbledore finally saves the day, but doesn't stay long enough for Harry to actually thank him. And Harry has a conversation with Umbridge where she denies that Cedric Diggory was murdered and said it was an accident. At least she's not as evil as some transphobes who would definitely say Cedric Diggory deserved it. Denial of facts is pretty much the Republican bread and butter right now. And when book bans are being done, it's because they don't trust you to form your own opinion. They don't think you're smart enough to do that. After all, why would you support their crazy ideas when you could learn something else? It's not just ideologies in these book bans that are going on. Hiding information is inherently a problem for society because it limits what can be done. Like, for example, Entangle Makes 3 is a commonly banned book because God doesn't make mistakes. Even when it comes to homosexuality, we just don't want the kids to hear about it. Maybe these lawmakers should actually learn something and read something like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451. Oh wait, they're banned. And Harry's also kicked off the Quidditch team. Now you could think about this in terms of sports and trans people. Like, you can say we have an advantage all you want, but sports has a lot more to do with strength, which is actually debatable in science right now. Whether trans people actually retain their strength. Like, agility and strategy are different skills and might be more valuable in one sport over another. And I think a lot of these new restrictions are primarily being done now as a way of hurting trans people more than anything else. I mean, think about it this way. Why the hell are they banning trans people in chess now, which apparently has gender leagues? Why can't a trans woman play on the women's league in chess? Why can't a trans man play on the men's league in chess? Are you afraid the trans woman will just beat you at chess? Now that was a joke, but if you seriously support all sport bans on trans people, you gotta think a little bit more clearly about this and do the research. And also, when Umbridge is teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts without teaching spells, it's sort of like teaching history without, teaching history. In fact, trans people are a huge part of history, but you were likely never taught about it. For example, many Native American cultures are very accepting of queer people. When colonizers like Columbus came to America, the first people targeted were the queer people, the trans people. And yet there's a holiday celebrating this. The idea that you don't want to expose kids to sexual orientation or gender identity at a young age is dumb. We should ban all books that feature a heterosexual couple or cis kids. Matter of fact, don't include anyone with a gender identity, period. Not even like Dick and Jane books could be there. Because guess what? They have gender. Pretty much no book in the library would exist. Is that what you want? And now that I think about it, that's probably what you want. So Harry and his friends start Dumbledore's army, which is sort of like a geography club situation. Harry gets a vision of a snake attacking Mr. Weasley and tells Dumbledore right away and ends up saving him. And then Harry tries to do divination lessons with Snape, but it doesn't turn out well, and Harry sort of learns his dad was a dick. This also sort of says, just because your parents did something doesn't mean you have to. Just because your parents were cis doesn't mean you are. And Harry dates Cho Chang, but is eventually betrayed by her. And here's the thing. Being a good ally is hard. But you need to make sure you're doing the right thing. Because, well, actions have consequences. And it's important to be careful. And Harry gets this, hag message from Voldemort, and it tells him that he's going to attack Sirius in the Hall of Mysteries. Harry tries to get a hold of Dumbledore, but he's not available. Dumbledore's army was not enough. And much like in our real world, we as queer people can't do this on our own. We need our allies to help us. They try to escape, but Umbridge won't allow it, and Snape ends up saving the day with code words. And then the students face off with the Death Eaters in the Hall of Mysteries. And then Sirius is killed by Bellatrix Lestrange, his own family. Because, ironically enough, hate doesn't discriminate. And then Dumbledore finally has that conversation with Harry, and he tells him the truth. Voldemort targeted the Potters because Harry was born at the end of July, but someone was born the day before, Neville Longbottom. And Neville Longbottom could have also been a target, but instead, Voldemort went to target Harry. And I mean, you could think about this in terms of bigotry as well. A lot of so-called Christians target trans people and queer people as a whole. Even if it were a sin, which it's not, you could go after people who, let's say, are wearing fabric made of different materials, or people who eat meat on Fridays. Also, these same people, when they're so committed to hate, the Sixth Commandment and Ninth Commandment really just seem optional to them, and in the end the Dursleys are confronted and told to watch out. Which was a nice ending, but will be quickly underdone in the next one. But yeah, Harry has to go back to living with the Dursleys because bloodline connections. But that's not love. People who are blood related to you don't necessarily love you. Sure, they can, but that's not inherently love on its own. Love is a feeling and an action combined. Just sharing blood isn't going to do that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. You can also see an uncut version of this video on my Patreon at patreon.com/SallyPrideDirect. Plan starts as low as $3 a month. And thank you to my patrons for helping make this possible. It's Harry Potter week here on this YouTube channel, and tomorrow I'm going to be doing Transphobe or Ally Harry Potter Edition Part 1.